At the beginning of the film, we see a group of maximum security prison inmates attempting to escape through a tunnel they have excavated. Unfortunately, the plan fails, so they resort to something more perilous. The prisoners assemble in an open field, confront the massive wall adjacent to them, and run at full speed towards it. The plan is to immediately attack and destroy the fortification. After this, the film cuts back several months earlier. Ji-sung, a notorious and fearless gangster who works for Kim, an affluent billionaire, is introduced as the protagonist. He is notorious for assaulting, menacing, and, if necessary, murdering individuals. One day, Sung is ordered to eliminate Choi, a scientist. Consequently, he travels there with his crew. The old man begs for his life and even offers the gang a large sum of money, but they all refuse. When her son becomes bored, he advances with a knife at Choi, and the screen goes black. The next scene reveals that the criminals were unexpectedly apprehended by the police. As for the elderly man, he escaped the attempted assassination with only minor injuries. A prosecutor confronts Ji-sung and demands that he disclose the name of the organization for which he works. In exchange for the invaluable information, he even promises to reduce his sentence to just 2 years. However, she refuses to allow him to speak. He would rather perish than inform on his superior. The matter is finally brought to trial, and Ji-sung is sentenced to 8 years in a maximum security prison. While his employer, Kim, is pleased with his loyalty. He is also concerned that she may one day open his mouth. Later, when Ji-sung is being led to his cell, he hears someone whistling and immediately realizes who it is. In an instant, he fights off the guards, escapes from them, and hurries to the source of the sound. Ji-sung is astonished and overjoyed to discover that his best friend and former colleague Sun Tan is still living. I sometimes believe that Sun Tan is still alive. Then I simply blaze. It turns out that the latter was sentenced to the death penalty several years ago for homicide. Later, the two reunite on the playground and reflect on their youth. Tan soon inquires about his family, and upon learning that his parents have passed away, he becomes despondent. Nonetheless, he is optimistic that he will escape this desolate place one day. During the lunch break, Sung encounters a number of fellow inmates who have heard tales of his valor and fidelity. They promise to assist him in any way he desires within the confinement. The group's conversation is interrupted, however, when the local bully gang arrives and warns the newcomers to be silent. Ji-sung intently at the leader for some time, but he is currently unresponsive. Kim goes to the hospital to meet Choi and proposes that they do business together. The latter is oblivious that the individual seated next to him nearly assassinated him. Therefore, he accepts the offer. Since he was previously disgraced by Ji-sung, he desires Ji-sung's death. Choi therefore requests that Kim execute the notorious criminal by the end of the week. Hearing this, Kim is placed in a precarious situation. On the one hand, she acted as his trusted partner, and on the other, he desires to close the transaction at any cost. After some deliberation, he chooses the second option and consents to the assassination of his own right-hand man. Later, he visits Ji-sung in prison and gives him a false assurance that he is doing everything possible to secure his release. Our protagonist rapidly falls for the deception and is delighted that his boss cares for him. He then discloses that, for various reasons, Sun Tan is alive and well in prison. This makes him unhappy, signifying that the two have had a dispute in the past. In the interim, Zhu Jiang, one of Chi Sung's close acquaintances and fellow gang members, is introduced. He visits the residence of Chief Sung and informs his parents of recent events. Surprisingly, the elderly couple is not at all shocked, as their son has always been a notorious criminal. As the three continue to shout, an old photograph on the wall reveals that Jia Jiang, Shi Sang, and Sun Tan have been closest friends since they were children. They grew up together and later joined the same clique in prison. Once all the officers had left, she began to sing. Inmates disclose a secret tunnel they'd been excavating for months. Actually, they are planning a prison escape. Shi Sung is impressed and tempted by their scheme, but he is aware that even a minor error can have dire repercussions in another cell. The group of abusers assault an innocent inmate named Moonsil with violence. She feels a pang of sympathy when she sees Moon Su's bruised and tear-streaked visage the following morning at breakfast. Unable to endure the injustice any longer, he unexpectedly retaliates against the attackers by severely beating them. Sung's actions earn him a great deal of respect from his fellow prisoners, who can only watch in amazement as a single man defeats an entire gang. In addition, they place him in solitary confinement. Choi takes Kim to his factory, where he discloses that he is extracting a lethal serum from a rare Japanese plant. This serum is capable of killing individuals instantly and painlessly. Kim is offered the serum for sale by Choi, but under one crucial condition. Shi Song must be eliminated first. A group of men violently invade the home of Shi Sung's parents during the night, viciously beat them, and flee in the morning. The bullied inmate, Moon Sael, is approached by one of Kim's henchmen, who offers him money to murder Shi Sang. However, Moon Su feels indebted to Shi Sung and is conflicted between his loyalty and the allure of quick wealth. Kim's adversary, the gangster Bong Shik, pays him a sick visit elsewhere. It is disclosed that he is handicapped after she stabbed him 7 times in the leg. So now he's pursuing revenge. As a first act of retaliation, he sent his men to Shi Sung's home last night to viciously assault his parents. Jia Jiang, who is also present, promptly rushes to the elderly couple upon hearing this. Thankfully, they are still breathing, so Jia Jiang transports them to the hospital for treatment. The next day, Sung's fiancée visits him in prison and informs him that his parents were attacked. The devastating news engulfs the audience. She sang in a maelstrom of emotions, but he had no idea that the evening would bring him more trouble. As he walks slowly toward his confinement, Moon Su abruptly appears and stabs him from behind. However, instead of retaliating, she remains composed and tells him to flee. It appears that he will pass away gradually. However, some guards locate him just in time and transport him to the hospital. In the interim, Jiao Jiang learns about the incident and discovers that his boss was responsible for it. Infuriated, he attempts to confront Kim, but his friends halt him, advising against it. Jiang then travels to the hospital to see Shi Sung, who has regained consciousness and is recuperating well, while they catch up. Shi Sung is informed of his evil boss's plan to have him murdered, but he is dismayed by the news. As he has always known, he is not wholly surprised that Kim would betray others for his own benefit. Later, Jiao Jiang returns to work and informs his supervisor that Shi Sung remains unconscious in an attempt to buy more time and protect his friends from further harm. The subsequent scene depicts Shi Sung's triumphant return to the prison, where his fellow detainees celebrate his survival. Instead of resigning himself to a life behind cells, he and his cellmates begin planning an audacious escape. They communicate in code with their allies on the outside and meticulously plan their escape. One night, they carry out their plan by crawling through the ducts and into the sewer system. At the tunnel's bifurcation, however, they are forced to make a difficult choice. Uncertain of which path to follow, one path leads to an army base, while the other leads to an airway base. They decide to regroup and return to their confinement. The next morning, the party begins excavating an underground tunnel in an attempt to locate the correct route to the airway base. They labor non-stop for weeks, exerting all of their efforts and perspiration. However, the prison warden declares one day that everyone will be transferred to the second floor after their tunnel plan fails. Shi Sung and his party devise a new strategy to escape the prison by demolishing the old perimeter wall. Every day during their break, they endeavor to push it down, but only end up hurting themselves. The guards observe this from their towers, but make light of them because they know their efforts are in vain. However, one day, unsuspected to them all, the wall begins to crack. Meanwhile, Zhu Zhang and his fellow gang members are practicing with their new armaments in the countryside. When Jia Zhang fires a shot into the air, it unintentionally hits a plane flying above, sending it into a spin. As the wall collapses upon impact, her son and his companions flee the scene. And many other prisoners follow suit, resulting in prison-wide pandemonium. Shi Sung and his 4 companions manage to escape along with more than half of the other captives. The news of the prison escape quickly becomes national news, and Kim's gang also learns about it, which makes him anxious. Shi Sung and his group conceal themselves within a photo studio and hold the proprietor hostage to evade the police. They also stole garments from a nearby dry cleaner and changed into them in order to avoid being recognized while watching the news. They discover that a member of their gang who has been apprehended by the authorities has revealed the name of their gang as Love and Friendship. Hellish when translated from the original language. This is the worst gang moniker in history. Despite their dire circumstances, the party is amused by this name and cannot help but laugh. Oh, it's terrible no matter what. Surprisingly, despite being in hiding, a hostage woman cooks for them as if they were her house visitors. Soon, the fiancé of Sung will arrive with phones and money for everyone. She is thrilled to finally be with her boyfriend, but he abruptly breaks up with her and warns her to remain away due to safety concerns. The police continue to seek for them. The group discusses their options and the next course of action. They are aware that they cannot remain hidden indefinitely and must devise a strategy to either leave the country or clear their names. However, she first desires vengeance against the individuals who assaulted his parents. The group is initially skeptical, but ultimately decides to join him. As the initial phase of their strategy, they infiltrate Bong Sheet's lair and viciously assault all of his men. Then, Shi Sung corners Bong Shik in his car and repeatedly stabs his other limb, ensuring that he will never walk again. Choi becomes enraged upon learning that Shi Sung is still alive due to the prison escape news. He confronts Kim about the deception and decides to withdraw from the agreement. However, this only infuriates the shrewd billionaire. He viciously attacks Choi, labeling him a useless scientist. The following scene reveals that Shi Sung is hellbent on destroying his erstwhile boss, Kim. But when he reaches the hideout, his closest friend Jia Zhang, who remains loyal to the billionaire, stops him. Each asks the other to step back, but when neither responds, a conflict ensues. Clearly, Shi Xing's emerges victorious. And once he has dealt with his friend, he and his cohort eliminate the remaining criminals. During all of this, she noticed Kim attempting to flee. Consequently, he pursues them in a car. But Jiao Jiang stops him once more, this time with a gun in his hand. Shi Xing warns his best friend to move out of the way, but when he doesn't, he has no option but to drive full speed toward him. Jiao Jiang reveals that he never intended to release the trigger by shockingly putting away his gun at the last second. However, it is now too late. As she fails to stop the car in time, he crashes into his best friend and injures him severely. He is racked with remorse and sorrow. He drives Jiao Zhong to the hospital immediately after placing him in the car. Meanwhile, the police are arresting all of his acquaintances one by one. She sang while being pursued by multiple police vehicles through the crowded streets of Busan. He has the opportunity to escape through a dark tunnel, but chooses to remain on the road and reach the hospital instead. Thankfully, the decision proves to be the incorrect one. As the police quickly encircle him as Ji-sun emerges, he observes Kim at the same intersection. Coincidentally, he pulls out a knife in a fit of fury and attempts to murder the billionaire. However, at that moment, a half-dead Jiao Jiang rises and executes Kim for his actions. The police shoot him multiple times, but at least he was able to save his best friend from further difficulty. We hear her singing, "I'm sorry, Jiao Jiang," as the screen fades to darkness.